How we doing tonight, guys? My name is Adam Byrne. I am the recruiting coordinator for nationwide for Jenkins Elite. We're going to go over our freshman recruiting class right now, the class of 2026. And just again, if you ever want to get a hold of me, my Twitter is at AB Jenkins Elite on Twitter, and my email is adam.byrne@jenkinselite.com. And below, I've just sent out a link right there for our people that are looking at us. If you're a Jenkins Elite member and you want to set up a recruiting meeting with me, just remember, anytime, just email or call me. For our non-members, I've just typed our link down below. With that said, let's get rolling. So first thing here, football season's finally here. You know, we just had week 1 last week. Unless you're in Alaska and Hawaii, then you got a couple weeks in as it is. But at the start of each season, the big thing we want to think about is being organized so we can capitalize on the recruiting process. And here are some kind of points of emphasis to follow and kind of guide you along the way in your path to ultimately becoming a college football player. So the first thing is kind of just understanding the college football landscape, because there's several different levels, and each level has its own kind of different twists and thoughts and kind of rules. So the first one that we have is what we call Division 1, which is FBS, and then there's FCS. So FBS would be Football Championship Series, and then we have our next one, we have Division 2, Division 3, NAIA, and then finally junior college. Now, FBS, when we're talking that, they're 85 full scholarships, right? And there's only and they're capped at 120 roster spots. Now, when we're saying full scholarships, that means you don't have to even pay for a piece of paper, a pencil. Everything is good to go, right? Now, that's the only level where it's like that. Everywhere else, it changes just a little, and we'll get into that here when we're talking about the next, which is our FCS, which is our football championship series. You know, these are schools, kind of smaller ones like Northern Colorado, Eastern Washington, Sam Houston State, North Dakota State. So these schools, we have 63 total scholarships, but they can be divided between 85 players. And the reason there's 63 scholarships is because with that, we're allowed to kind of package our scholarships, right? So it'll be like part academic, part athletic, and part need-based. So you can still get that full scholarship that you would essentially get at an FBS school, but it's going to be packaged and it's going to include academic aid as well, usually. And again, that's still at 120 roster spots. All right. Next, we have Division 2, which is schools like Colorado School of Mines, Fort Lewis College, Ferris State, schools like that, little smaller ones, kind of the more local ones. And with those, our max scholarships is 36, right? And you can, again, divide those and package them just as you would as an FCS school, right? And the roster there, a big difference is the roster is uncapped. So you can have as many guys on the program as you want. And a lot of times this is the case because of Division 2 schools, you know, these are smaller schools. So with these smaller schools, you know, they want to have as many guys on the football roster because that ends up being more kids at their school. Now the next one we have is Division 3, which there is no scholarships as far as athletic scholarships. There's no athletic aid. But again, they're going to package you with your academics, your need-based, and different other merit scholarships you may get. And again, Division 3 schools are usually even smaller than our Division 2 schools. So again, an uncapped roster. And the final one we have is NAIA, which is a total of 24 scholarships where you can divide them. Again, same thing, merit-based, academic-based, you know, we're trying to get you the best deal possible, right? And then there's also an uncapped roster. So really the big difference between, like, say, Division 1, so FBS and all the other ones is if you have a Division 1 scholarship, right, which is, I think equates to about 1 to 2% of all college football, high school football players across the country. You're not going to have to worry about necessarily. Every scholarship is the same, as opposed to at a Division 2 school, an FCS school. You know, one school might package you totally different than the other. So there is kind of like a price game that gets played, as opposed to with the FBS. It's kind of just you're done. Here it is. You don't have to worry about paying anything. But at an FCS or Division 2 school, it may be different in the fact that, all right, this school is going to be offering me $5,000 for my academics, $5,000 for football. And then another school might offer me $4,000 for academics, $6,000 for football, or maybe $3,000 for football. So these are decisions we'll ultimately have to make going down the road. Next thing that's really big, and I cannot stress this enough, is how to use social media, right? This can be either your biggest tool or your biggest enemy if you're reckless with it. And I cannot say that enough. In today's modern recruiting world, coaches are going to use Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, any way they're going to try to reach out to you one way or another. Especially because this is the easiest way for coaches to look you up is via social media as opposed to your phone, right? Because you don't have not everyone has their phone number just readily available. And usually if they do, what is it on? Their Twitter, right? So we always want to make sure our Twitter and everything is looking good because these programs are going to scour your social media to see what your interests are and to see what image you're projecting. And I can't tell you how often that you run into a problem where you have a kid who is a great football player, but he's putting stuff on social media he shouldn't be, and then ultimately he gets taken off a recruiting board. So always don't just be cognizant of what you're retweeting, but also think about what you're liking, because you can look up the likes that a coach can look up what you like as well. And if they see you're liking some wild stuff, that alone, even if you're not reposting it, that alone can get you taken off a board. So remember, multiple platforms is always good, and there's different, because that's another way for your film to get seen, okay? So, building a Twitter bio. We'll just start from the ground up. Try to use as close to your real name as possible. Again, the goal is for us to be found, right? So we don't want to be, Hitstick 27. We want it to be Adam Byrne, number 27, right? Something like that. Something that's easy to be found. Next, we want to put our class year, which is very important because NCAA rules vary. Their rules vary greatly depending on what class you are. Especially like freshmen, for example, we're not going to be able to talk to a coach really until September 1st of our junior year is really when things get rolling. You can talk to a coach in person. So it's very important we have that class year so we know exactly what the recruiting guidelines are for you. Next one, we want to put our high school name, and we want to make sure we spell out our name. There's a lot of Rocky Mountain high schools, for example, right? There's all kinds. There's probably 6 of them in the country, so we want to make sure we're putting Rocky Mountain High School, right? And then all that, and not just RMHS. We want, again, easy to be found. Then we want to put our position or positions we play, followed by our GPA and test score, right? Because again, as we just spoke about a little earlier, a lot of these schools are going to want to package you as far as trying to figure out if you can get into that school and what merit scholarship you may qualify for. So you always want to put your GPA and test score, and again, put your location, your actual location. We don't want to put, on Revis Island or something like that, because again, there's a lot of schools that have similar names. Are you at Rocky Mountain High School in Meridian, Idaho? Or are you in Rocky Mountain High School in Fort Collins, Colorado? We gotta figure this out. So again, the goal is easiest to be found, and this also goes with our profile picture. We want our profile picture to either kind of a headshot of us so they can see us, or in our uniform, right? And so then again, they can see that, all right, this is the guy I was watching. I can see his number. This is the school that I've been watching his huddle on, right? Finally, we have our background picture, which isn't super important necessarily, but we want it to be something that is kind of sports related or something like that. Again, this goes back to making sure we're posting the right thing, right? And then finally, we want to put that highlight link right in our bio. And you can just copy and paste that in there, so then we can click that highlight and be ready to go. And now as we get older, and each year we're having new highlight films, we want to make sure we're updating. We want to make sure our link is being updated. That way they're seeing the most recent film of us. All right, speaking of highlights, how to make one. Always start with an info slide, right? Put your name, phone number, graduation year, test scores, GPA, okay? Next, we want to keep the video short. It doesn't need to be more than 5 minutes. That 3 to 5 minutes is kind of that sweet spot, right? And this is for an end of the year highlight. If we're going mid-year, probably 2 to 3 minutes top, right? And we always want to prioritize our best plays and highlight our skill set. So we don't want to see the same play over and over. If you're a receiver, we don't need to see 5 go routes, or if you're a running back, we don't need to see you run power 4 times. We want to include a variety of plays and really be able to highlight our whole skill set. And also, we want to be showing plays against our best competition possible. Obviously, you're going to have better plays usually against weaker competition, but when we get to college, right, that's when you're going to all those guys you're playing are better football players. So if you have a great game against, a guy that's going to a big school, you want to make sure that's your opening highlight, right? Next, we don't need fancy music, transition, anything about that. Nobody really cares, and it's really just time you're wasting, right? And then finally, we want to make sure when you watch it, make sure you talk to your coach before you post it, right? You want someone else to look at it. When you do it, think of it as a rough draft, and then have a coach talk, or talk to your coach about it, or if you're in the Jenkins program, feel free to always send it to me. Another thing we always want to be cognizant of, especially if we're quarterbacks, is where we're highlighting ourselves. We always want to make sure, if you're a quarterback, you don't even need to put the ring around you before a play. Because quarterback, I know where you're going to be at every play. You're behind the center. Because if you're doing that circle beforehand, depending on when you're doing it, if you're not careful, you'll cut off either your throwing motion, your footwork, and that can get things wonky and make it harder to evaluate you. Now, if you're a receiver and you're lining up in different positions, or if you're a D lineman, then we want to make sure we're highlighting ourselves, but we never want to do that mid-play. We always want to do before the ball is snapped, and I cannot stress that enough. Again, we want to make it easy to watch and easy to evaluate. So next thing, we always have a question of our camps, right? We have several different kinds. We have kind of exposure camps, which are not affiliated directly with a college. Example of these could be Jenkins Elite is somewhat considered an exposure camp. I would call that more of a skills camp, and that's really what we work on. So really, when we're thinking of exposure camps, it's more like Elite 11, the opening, the rivals camps, things like that, right? Next, we have college. We have college camps, which are football camps that are held directly on your college campus, run by the college football staff for themselves, right? And we really like, as far as when we're talking to our guys, we really like having our guys go to college football camps for a variety of reasons specifically, because then you get to go to that campus, you get to meet that staff, you get to see that town, you get to kind of go around, meet guys in the program, see the facilities, and you kind of get to think to yourself, hey, is this someplace I could see myself going for the next 4 to 5 years, right? Next, we have mega camps, which are usually involve multiple colleges and universities all coming together to evaluate prospects. There's usually a handful of these kind of all over the country. TCU is known for having a really big mega camp, as well as University of Indianapolis, just to name a few. And at these camps, there'll be hundreds and hundreds of kids usually. But the nice thing is you're going to have multiple schools from across the country at all different sizes, right? You'll have junior colleges there all the way through Alabama, right? Finally, we have combines. A combine is usually it's like what you watch on the NFL combine every spring, right? They're going to take your height, weight, speed, do your jumping ability, it's just a tape measuring contest. Not really football is involved. And then finally, we have showcases, which are kind of like you have your combine, your standard combine, and then usually there's some position-specific drills and some competitions as well. So really, when it comes to my opinion on camps, I really like more like skill building camps and going to camps that are on college football campuses primarily. Because most of the time, if you're on campus, that's when those coaches are going to usually take your height and weight and do some running with you as well, right? And they're gonna want their numbers more so than just a random company's. So I always try to push college camps on campus, mostly to our guys, as the camps I like to send our guys to the most. So freshman year, some things we always want to knock off here is we always want to meet with our high school counselor, right? Because we want to tell them, hey, we want to make sure I have an NCAA approved schedule because ideally I want to be a college football player, right? So when we have that schedule, we want to make sure we're taking the right math classes, English classes, science. Make sure, and that counselor knows what an NCAA schedule is, and they'll be able to help you out and make sure you're locked in and have the right ones. Because ultimately, that's who's going to be sending your transcript out to colleges when they reach out to your high school, is that counselor. So make sure we have a great relationship with our high school counselor. And again, that way we can get that NCAA approved schedule. Next, we want to fill out our SMART goal sheet. If you are in the Jenkins Elite program, you have been sent our recruiting guide, and that one of the first things we have in that guide is filling out our goal sheet, right? And we want to make sure we're making realistic goals, and goals that are ultimately building to our goal of playing college football, right? Next, we want to talk to our high school coach about playing in college. Just let him know from the jump, this is something I'm serious about. Football is a passion of mine, and I want to take this to the next level. And just being honest with that coach and telling them that early is a big deal, because I can't tell you how many guys, they're playing their senior year, and they have a good season, and then they're worrying why coaches aren't really talking to them. Well, have you told your coach, like, college football is something I would like to do? Because ultimately, that high school coach is who's going to talk to those college coaches more than anyone else, right? Next, we want to create our NCAA certification account, which is just, again, getting ready to be certified by the NCAA, because eventually, once we're a sophomore, we can create that profile page, which is then going to have our ID number, and then that way it's easier for coaches to look us up. And also, when you get older and you want to take your college visits, you want to make sure that's what allows you to take those visits, is that you're registered with the NCAA. Next thing we want to do is register for our PSAT, a practice test, just to kind of figure out where we are test taking wise. Now, obviously, the last couple years, colleges are still kind of going away from standardized tests and looking more towards their GPA. But at the same time, we always want to make sure we have that SAT option as well, because you'll have a test optional option as well as taking the test usually at most schools now. But we always want to make sure we got everything kind of both. So if we want to go GPA, if we don't have as good a GPA, then maybe we want to focus on getting that test score, because some people are better at taking tests, some people are better just in the classroom. Everyone learns different. Next thing we want to do is at the end of our season, build that highlight film that we just went over, right? As far as and it really, as our freshman year, it's probably not going to have varsity film. So really just look at this as a rough draft and us getting better and getting ready to create our for the next year when we're sophomores or in juniors, when we get that varsity time. And that way it's not our first time making that film, and that we're confident in making it and we're ready to go with it. And then our second to last one is making our summer recruiting plan in that spring of our freshman year. And by our summer recruiting plan, I mean we want to sit down and kind of think about, all right, what are the camps I want to go to this summer, or showcases, whatever it may be. What are the camps that my high school is going to, and how does that fit into my schedule? When I'm telling guys for our summer recruiting plan, I really like our guys to kind of go to a myriad of different options. Go to like an FBS camp, a D2 camp, an FCS camp. Different levels, so then you can kind of see where you fit in the big picture, right? So that you don't want to go to all small schools camps necessarily, or all bigger schools camps. You want to give yourself a little parity, so then you can kind of figure out what level is ultimately best for you. And then finally, at the end of every year, we always want to update our athletic resume, which again you can find in our Jenkins Elite handbook. NCAA eligibility registration. So we kind of highlighted this a little earlier about making our profile page, right? So if you want to play in the NCAA, whether it be at Division I or Division II or FCS, right, we need to register with the NCAA Eligibility Center at eligibilitycenter.org. Plan on registering before your sophomore year of high school. Excuse me. So we have your certification account. So you must be certified by the NCAA Eligibility Center to compete at an NCAA institution, Division I or Division II. Division III you don't need, because they're not offering you an athletic scholarship. But before you can make an official visits or sign on the dotted line for your national intent, you must complete your certification account. This is extremely important. Do not pass go until you got your certification account. So to get that, you need the following. We need a valid email, basic personal info, our student education history, sports participation history, and then the payment, I believe it's $90. And once you get that all taken care of, then you're ready to go. And when push comes to shove and it's your senior year, you can sign on that dotted line and be ready to go and ultimately play college football. Academic requirements, right? And so this goes back to talking with our high school counselor. We need to pass 16 core courses. So that's 4 English, 3 math, 3 science, 2 social science, 1 foreign language, a comparative religion, philosophy, and then 2 additional subjects of any of the above, right? Next, we need at least a 2.3 GPA. Ideally, why don't we just have a 3.2 GPA and just not even get close to that, right? Because, again, the better your grades are, the better that coach is going to feel about offering you that scholarship down the road. So we don't want to go the bare minimum. We always want to shoot higher. Next, we need a minimum ACT composite of 75 or a minimum SAT score, which is just our math and English, of 900. So next we have our sliding scales. So when we have our sliding scales, that's kind of what determines your eligibility. So this kind of goes back to when we're talking about our grades and our test scores, right? So the way you look at it is the higher your GPA is, the lower your test score can be. Or if you have a lower GPA, you want to have a higher test score, right? So it's basically, this is set up so it doesn't matter what type of learner you are, that as long as you have both of these kind of in that find that happy medium, you can still get into your school of your choice and be eligible by NCAA standards. Recruiting periods is the next thing we're going to talk about, right? So in our recruiting periods, right, we have 4 different types. We have our dead period, which coaches may not have any in-person contact with recruits or parents whatsoever. Dead, I feel like explains enough, right? Next, when we have our quiet period. Our quiet period, coaches can only have in-person contact when you're on their campus. So a lot of that is in the summer, right, when they have their college camps. So these are times where, again, the only time you're going to see that coach, and this is especially valuable to our younger guys because they can't get evaluated by coaches yet, is you have to be on their college camp on campus, right? So and then our third one is our evaluation, where coaches can watch athletes compete in person or visit their school. These coaches can't communicate with you or your parents off campus, though. So a lot of times that evaluation period, that's going to be in the spring or the fall, when it's football season, or in the spring where you're kind of working on 7-on-7 or training. And that's usually the time of year you see kind of coaches in the halls, and they might pull one of the older guys in or pull you in and say, hey, I'm so-and-so from this university and I'd like to meet you, right? So that's our evaluation period. And then finally we have our contact period, which, is the direct opposite of dead period. All communication between athletes and coaches is permissible, right? So now we're going to go and talk about our recruiting calendars, which we're going to show you both our FBS, FCS, and D2 calendars. And you can see from there as far as when it is our dead period, quiet period, eval, and contact periods. So we'll start here at FBS. So right now, it's August 31st. So through August 31st, it's a dead period. So we got 2 more days, right? Until what? Evaluation, right? Which is green means go. So that evaluation period is going to be September 1st through November 26th. So basically, all of football season for the vast majority of kids, right? Next, we have our contact period, which is from November 27th to December 17th. And then just December 18th, we have a short quiet period, all of 1 day. And then December 19th through the 12th, over Christmas, that's a dead period. Coaches got to go back to their wives and their families after football season, spend a little quality time with them sometime, right? Then after January 12th, the 13th through the 28th is again our only other contact period for FBS. And then on the 29th, we have a single day that's a quiet period. And then we go into a dead period again from January 30th to February 28th. And then once we hit March through the first 2 weeks of April, we're back at a quiet period. And then we get our spring eval period, which again, this is when you're kind of going to see coaches in the hallways, right? Especially because it's not during season, so these coaches are really working recruiting. Usually this is when they're looking at juniors going into their senior years, or sophomores, going into their junior years. And this is, that's the last 2 weeks of April and the entire month of May. And then we have June 1st through the 26th is quiet period. And if you notice, that's when you're going to see the vast majority of your college football camps are going to be in that June section right there between the 1st and the 26th. And then we have a dead period for about a month, which is June 27th through July 24th. And then we finish up with a quiet period again, July 25th through the 31st, which is again, that's usually that last small window where you're going to have some college football camps that are on campus at those schools. And now we have our FCS. If you notice, it's a little smaller calendar, and that's pretty standard because the bigger level of football you're at, the more the recruiting calendar gets a little more complicated. So if we're going through our FCS, right, again, we're still in that dead period through the month of August. And then if you notice, our eval period is the same, right, the September 1st through November 26th. And then we have our contact again from the 27th through December 17th. We have our single day quiet period, December 18th. Have our same dead period, the 19th through January 12th. And then we have we have another contacts period in there, right? 13th through the 28th. We have our single day quiet period, January 29th. Then we have our last dead period which is just a few days, January 30th through February 2nd. And then we're quiet period, February 3rd through April 14th. And then we have that same eval period, right, as we did with our FBS of April 15th through May 31st. And then the big difference is at FCS schools, you're in a quiet period essentially all summer. So that's one thing you'll notice, like FCS schools, they'll still have camp. They'll still be out kind of doing camps and things all of July, whereas opposed to at FBS schools, you only have those last few days of July. Finally, we have Division II. So Division II, still in a dead period all of August, right? And then we have that same eval period we've had before, September 1st through November 27th. Then we have our contacts period from November 28th to December 18th. And then we have a short dead period again, right? Just 2 days of the 19th and 21st of December. And then we have our contacts period, and this is one that's different. Our contact period is a little different because we have December 22nd through January 8th. And then we have a short 2-day dead period, January 9th through the 11th. We have a contact period. Then we have another contact period in January, the 12th through the 29th. That's a big time usually that you'll see a lot of you'll get a lot of visits at Division II school. That's usually you'll have a lot of recruiting weekends that time of year, especially that's usually when especially like the RMAC schools. If you're a local Colorado kid, like we have the vast majority of the kids in our program, or even if you're in Texas, the schools in like the Lone Star Conference, that's when you're going to have a lot of visits as far as kids getting recruited, right? And then we have our final dead period for Division II, which is only, very short, the 30th through February 1st. And then the rest of the time is, we got our contacts period, an additional contacts period from February 2nd to March 6th. So the one thing about Division II is you can have more contact, I would say, with coaches that at any other level, which is ideal, right? It's, especially as a young guy, that's valuable because, these Division II coaches, they might be at a Division II school now, but by the time you're a senior, they might be at a much bigger school. So this is the nice thing, is you really try to use that to your advantage, right, of being able to contact these coaches. And then finally, we have a quiet period, March 7th through April 14th. And then we have an eval period, right, for the last 2 weeks of the 6 weeks, with the last 2 weeks in April and the whole month of May. And then we have a quiet period literally for 2 months, which is a huge span, right? So again, Division II schools with having those quiet periods and more contacts periods, that's really the easiest level to get in contact with a coach, more so than FCS or FBS. All right, and on that note, if you got any questions, comments, concerns, I understand recruiting, there's a lot of moving parts, but you can always please feel free to reach out to me at any time. Again, my email is right there below, adam.byrne@jenkinselite.com. You got my phone number right there, 970-903-6858. Feel free to call or text me. And then finally, we have the Twitter, which is AB@Jenkins Elite. Thank you guys so much for your time. I greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions, you can type something in the chat bar, and I'm more than happy to answer it. And I'll kind of stick on here for a couple minutes. But thank you guys so much for your time. Like I said, really the biggest thing with our freshman year is really just creating winning habits, right? So we want to make sure, we're getting our grades taken care of, we're getting in the weight room, and really honestly the biggest thing is, getting our social media ready. And more so than anything, and I really can't stress this enough, is, getting comfortable making the right choices and hanging out with the right group of friends, right? We want to make sure, because not everyone has the same goals that we do, and those people can drag us down, whether it be intentionally or not. So make sure we're creating winning habits, because ultimately we're laying the foundation for what's going to make us a great athlete and a great person down the road. All right. Well, on that note, we'll have a great evening, you guys. And like I said, feel free to reach out to me in any fashion at any time. Have a great Tuesday, and more importantly, have a great season. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys and talking to you all in the future. Have a good one. Bye.